equipping you to navigate your grief journey after child and sibling loss. This is the Hope After Child and Sibling Loss podcast. On each episode, we explore the many challenges of grief as guests share their stories of loss. It's also a place where you'll hear about God showing up in our darkest moments and restoring meaning, purpose, and hope to shattered lives. I'm Greg Bufkin, your host and one of the co-founders of the Empty Chair Endeavor. To learn more about us, please visit our website at www.emptychairendeavor.com. Well, hi, and welcome back for another episode. I'm Greg Bufkin, and today I'll be talking with Janet Boxx as she shares about the unthinkable loss of 3 children. As we all know, the death of a child is unspeakable trauma for any parent, but to lose 3 is really difficult to even try to comprehend. Janet's is a story of resilience and faith in the face of such profound pain and suffering. It's also one of how our God and Savior Jesus Christ steps into life's darkest and most painful seasons, offering us His presence, tenderness, compassion, and hope when we need it most. And now here's my conversation with Janet. Well, Janet, welcome to our podcast. It is really good to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah. And for our listeners, Janet and I have spoken previously by phone. And so we've had the advantage of getting to know each other a bit. So for you guys, it'll be the first time. So I would like at this point just to give Janet a couple of minutes and let her share anything that she would like personally. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. Nothing like being put on the spot.
Yeah. I was going to say, I can tell you that I'm the mother of 4 children.
Yeah.
That our first child was stillborn as a result of a cord death, and that was at 37 weeks, so he was considered full term. And then we went on to have 3 daughters, Bethany, Grayson, and Katie. And of the 3, Grayson and Katie were born with a progressive neuromuscular disease. And, it wasn't diagnosed for a long time. So, for like when they were really young, everybody thought that what was going on was something that they would outgrow. So, you might want to cut all of that. So, you can introduce the story if you'd like.
Oh, no. No, that is absolutely fine, Janet. I wanted to ask, where do you guys live for our listeners?
We live in Bentonville, Arkansas. You might know that as the home of Walmart Corporation.
Oh, yes.
That's probably what it's best known for.
Well, you got to be known for something, right?
Yeah. We can also say we are the home of the world famous Crystal Bridges Art Museum.
Okay. Well, you're known for 2 things then.
Yeah.
That's better than where we live. We're not really known for much of anything except we're on the crossroads of I-20 and I-95.
Where are you?
Yeah, I'm in South Carolina.
Okay.
And we live in a little town that people are familiar with in other parts of the country because they typically come through Florence on 95 if they're headed south to Charleston or down to Florida. And if they're headed to Myrtle Beach, they come through Florence on I-20. So that's kind of what we're known for.
Okay. You're at the crossroads.
We are a crossroads, exactly. Well, Janet, I just appreciate so much your willingness to come and share your heart today and share the story not only of your loss by stillbirth, but you also have a story of loss with your 2 daughters, Bethany and Katie. So we can step back in time just a little and let you share a little about them and and what happened to bring you to the point where we are today. So why don't we just kind of step back in time and just kind of fill us in. I know that you lost your son, I believe, to stillbirth, and that was your first child, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That be
Did you guys have any kind of warning or anything that was going to happen?
No, it was 1992, and, had a very normal pregnancy.
Right,
We did childbirth classes, and in the course of those classes, they kind of discussed, if you don't feel like you feel the baby moving, then drink some apple juice because that will give them a sugar rush and they'll start
right.
moving. So there came a point where it was 3 weeks before his due date, and I was really kind of struggling to tell, is he moving or am I feeling Braxton Hicks contractions? It was my first pregnancy. I really didn't know exactly what to expect. And so there came a day, you know, that I said to my husband, I'm not confident the baby's moving. And I'm a worrywart. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're just paranoid, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So, he doesn't expect trouble, and I don't necessarily expect trouble, but I'm more prone to be concerned about things.
yeah.
So anyway, we got some apple juice, and he laid down to take a nap, and I sat there and waited, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. And so I called the hospital, and they said, you need to come in. And so they did a sonogram, and the doctor, looked at the nurse and said, we need to use a better sonogram machine. Apparently they have, basic model on the floor and another one elsewhere. And so they're like, fine. And they left the room. And David and I prayed. And I don't know if the nurse came in during the course of our prayer, but she comes back and she said, I just want you to know the doctor isn't ordering another sonogram to give you hope. She's doing it to confirm her diagnosis. And that's how we were told that he died.
Wow,
So,
wow.
it was just really shocking.
And how long before your due date was that?
It was 3 weeks before.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes loss by stillbirth or by miscarriage are really misunderstood by a lot of people because I suspect maybe, and I'm not sure, but I've had a lot of conversations with other moms who have lost children through stillbirth or miscarriage, and I think they most feel that their loss is undervalued.
Yes.
And I'm not sure why that is, but I suspect it's because people think, well, you never really got to know them. So maybe it didn't hurt as bad as if, they had already been here, But that's not the case, is it?
No, and I think there's a couple of factors. I think that the prevalence of abortion and the fact that miscarriage is not all that uncommon has kind of devalued life in the womb.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, but beyond that, so we discovered that, we had life insurance. It was supposed to cover your children.
Right.
So life insurance doesn't pay out for a stillborn child.
Mm, really?
Yeah, the newspaper wouldn't print an obituary. So all of these things kind of add together, and they communicate that your child didn't exist. And I think that people don't really know how to deal with pre-birth losses, that I think when a miscarriage happens early on, I think you have a little bit of less attachment. Lots of times they're occurring before you even felt the child move. It doesn't mean they're unwanted. It's just you haven't had time to, really, you haven't spent all your time preparing for the child. You may not have done anything with a room or clothing or had showers or any of these things that all kind of play
Right.
into the anticipation of the child coming. And just so people don't know how to talk about it, and so they really don't. And the way we are comforted is generally by, well, you can have another, as if people are replaceable. And
Right, right.
everybody
Yeah.
who's lost a spouse knows, or lost a child of any age, knows that people are not replaceable, you know?
And no, they indeed are not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes I think people just they say things that if they stopped and thought about seriously before they said it, they probably wouldn't have said it.
right.
And that's a good example of one. Well, you can
Yeah,
always have another child, or you can always find another husband or another wife, and
exactly.
the list goes on,
Yes, I was
but that's not
shocked.
helpful.
Yeah, and I was shocked to learn of widows, of any age. Like, you're a widow of 60, and people wait 3 months, and then they're wanting to set you up, and it's like, "What?" You
Yeah,
know? And it's
yeah.
really we are a culture that's uncomfortable with death, and we're
Oh,
very,
very much so.
yeah, and we're very positive thinking forward, and so it's like we have to find the next positive thing, and what would the
Yeah.
next positive thing be?
Yeah, we're a culture that's not too keen on lament. The
Yes,
whole idea of actually spending time stepping into and experiencing the pain and the suffering caused by, in our cases, grief from the loss of a child. And so, people want us to move on. They want us to they want the the us that was pre-loss back in their lives so that we can just kind of carry on with our original relationship. But it doesn't work that way. They don't get the old us back. They get a new version of us
right,
because we're never the same again.
right.
Now, for you, as if that wasn't enough to experience the loss of your son through stillbirth, fast forward 12 years later, and you lose two of your daughters in a traffic accident, and the third daughter is critically injured in that same accident. Now, some people, might would think, well, Janet's experienced grief previously, so maybe she's a little bit better prepared this time, and it's not as bad as it would be otherwise. And I suspect I know the answer to that is absolutely not true.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Janet, I've rarely interviewed anybody who has been through the number of losses that you've been through, where it all involves the loss of a child. Most of us feel like we barely survived the loss of one child and cannot imagine having to live through it again. Tell us what. There's probably no words. I'm having a hard time coming up with even how to ask you this question, but how do you step into that level of grief again, and this time magnified even more? You're grieving the loss of two daughters, and you've got another daughter in the hospital you're not sure is going to survive this accident either. How do you do that?
So let me back up just a minute to make a correction. It was 21 years between when Cole was born and when the collision occurred.
Oh, I
Um,
apologize. I
no,
had
that's okay. It's
that
been
maybe that's
12 years almost since the collision. So that's where
I
you
thought
got that.
I thought maybe I had dyslexia for a minute and didn't know it.
That would be a good explanation since they're
Right.
just, you know,
Yeah, I
the
inverted the
numbers turned
numbers.
around. Yes.
Right. Okay, well, thanks for correcting that.
So, well, how do you begin? Honestly, when you lose a bunch all at one time, it's not like your so when you lost your child, it was it was overwhelming. It was pretty
Yeah.
much all you could think about
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was kind of your world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So when you lose multiples, it's really the same. It's not like you have, oh, this level would be my grief if I just lost one. But now I have to add 10 more pounds on top of that. So if I just lost two.
Yeah.
And then I have to add this on. The emotions all come at once. So they're not
Yeah.
like easily divisible, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
It does. I think we just think in terms of, I guess, magnitude of grief,
yeah,
and in our, in our minds, we just associate, well, gosh, if it was this bad, and then you add this to it, oh, good grief. I mean, how do you even begin to try to move forward at all,
right.
and process something like that?
Yeah. So, and moving forward is really putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
imagine it would have to be on a almost a minute by minute basis some days.
yes, like I was really driven by what Grayson's needs were. And, that's not to say I didn't care about my husband. He was actually injured as well.
Hmm. Yeah,
But,
of
it's
course.
like as a parent, you have this role and and
Yeah,
David was up and walking and moving, so, I knew that he was being treated, that
sure,
his
sure.
physical needs were being met. We were still, he needed more rest, that kind of thing. So that was a part of that. But primarily my focus was on her and whatever her needs were. And you just deal with what's directly in front of you is basically
Sure.
what you do.
Yeah. Well, Janet, would you say that because your focus had to be your surviving daughter, do you think in retrospect that in that it helped in grieving your two daughters who didn't survive it? Or do you think that maybe it delayed your ability to really grieve for them? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess I would say that one, you we don't just grieve death in life. We grieve lots of different things.
Sure.
Um, and my daughter's health had been an issue, and so by that I mean Grayson had a progressive neuromuscular disease, and her younger sister Katie, had the same disease. Um,
Right.
Grayson was more severely impacted and was 2 years ahead, so her degree of disability was greater and kind of, what she was dealing with was much more visible, much more demanding at that time. But we had
Right.
two kids that we were already grieving things like lost mobility. They could walk, but their balance was affected and it affected their gait. There was trips and falls and it affected fine and gross motor skills. So it was really an overall effect, but to different levels.
Sure.
So, but we were grieving the loss of mobility and the loss of hopes and dreams and expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes people who talk a lot about grief, who are in some role of or in a position to help grieving people, they'll refer to what you just said as future grief. And we grieve those things that never will happen. Sometimes I think that's something that people on the outside miss. They from their perspective, we're grieving the loss that we just experienced that they know about, that they've heard about, they've seen. But what they don't realize is that, we grieve those next Christmases. We grieve when we see somebody else's child get married, and we think, that could have been my child. And the list just kind of goes on and on and on, as you well know.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's true. So I wouldn't say it postponed my grieving or, delayed it in any way. When you say did it kind of help? I guess, it was just part of it. Like it
Right.
it added layers to the grief.
That's a good
And
way to put it. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know about when you lost your child. For me, it's like the Holy Spirit is like, we're working on this issue. I mean, your mind is consumed with this, that, and the other, right? And he's helping you process through those things. And maybe you get past that. And then you're grieving the next thing. So maybe you were initially grieving the fact that your child was never going to start kindergarten. If you've lost a young child or an infant and you're watching the children that would have been born around the same time, they're starting to do that and you're hitting that area of grief. So maybe you're grieving for a teenager, the fact that they didn't go to prom or graduate high school or graduate college, and you're addressing those things. Kind of sometimes you're looking forward to those, and sometimes and you're aware of them, and then when the season actually comes, then you're addressing them again.
Again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, it's not like a circle where you're repeating on the same path, but more like an upside down tornado. The cone?
Right.
It's like
Right.
you're
Right.
going up and you're coming back around to it, and you're grieving at different levels as you rise through this cone.
Yeah. And I think that speaks directly to the fact that grief is just messy
Yes.
and it's terribly unpredictable.
Yes.
You don't ever know when there's going to be something that triggers it and you get hit by a wave that you just didn't see coming at
Yes.
all.
Yes.
We know that there are some. We know that when the holidays come, when our child's birthday comes, when our birthday comes around, Father's Day, Mother's Day, you can see those things coming.
Right.
Eh, I'm not sure that I would say you can prepare for it, but at least you can see them coming, and you're not taken. It's not like being blindsided. But
Yes.
some of these other things, like you're talking about, a smell, a scent of your child on clothing, or something that you saw that your child made for you when they were in kindergarten and you hadn't seen it in years. Those are the kind of things we're talking about that can really sneak up on you.
Yes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
actually, it'll be 12 years in December. So we've been through 11 missed birthdays for each
Yeah.
of the girls. Well, we just had Katie's birthday was Sunday. So some years, because I processed a lot of my grief, some years the birthday is not a particularly hard day. And then there are years where you're just surprised that, "Oh, I'm really having a hard time today."
Yeah.
And, it creeps up on you and you're kind of blindsided by it. You're not prepared because I think I processed that. But
Exactly.
yeah, and I kind of feel like I, th- so my philosophical thinking is I, I view the Holy Spirit as extremely meticulous. I think that working through grief takes a long, long time because he works on something when you're ready for it. And if you're
Yeah, I
not
agree.
ready to move to the next step, he waits. He lets you work on something else. And maybe if you're really lucky, he gives you a little kind of a reprieve. You
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
few weeks or months or whatever where you're doing much better.
Yeah.
Not like it's
Yeah.
great, but it's much better.
Yeah, and it's not a linear progression.
Yes.
It's like you said, you can you feel like you're making some strides forward. You have some, you start having more good days than bad days. And you kind of think maybe I'm out of the woods a little bit.
And
We
then
know it's a
boom.
life. Yeah, exactly. Boom. It's a lifetime journey. And
Yes.
we know that.
Yeah.
You don't ever get over it.
Yes.
You learn to live with it and you learn to live through it.
Yes.
And we know that well. And if you haven't experienced it, it's probably incredibly difficult to understand. But I wanted to ask you too, when I was just thinking about what you guys have been through. And we know that people see grief as the emotions. People who are looking at seeing us, doing life with us, they see it as our emotions, in that we cry sometimes, we're sad, sometimes we're down. But you and I know also that there's the physical impact, there's the mental impact, there's spiritual impact.
Mhm.
What if looking back over these, let's concentrate, I guess, over these past 12 years particularly. Oh, what what did you struggle with the most of all, or
Gosh.
would you say I can't separate it out? It was all of them.
Yeah, like, it was ugly. Let's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
say it that way.
Grief's not pretty, is it?
Yeah. So, I I think it's impacted by a lot of things like seasons of life. So when Cole died, we were in a season of building a family, and
Right.
then, there came other kids. And it didn't make him any less valuable, but it gave us some things to look forward that we missed without him.
Right.
Um, right? And it also, I mean, there were things about dealing with grief that I did process when we lost him that I didn't have to readdress when the girls died.
Okay.
So, for example, a lot of people say things and they're well intentioned. And then they really, everything you hear, you interpret. It's like walking through fog in terms of one, how your brain works, but
Right.
but two, everything you see in front of you is through this haze of grief. And if you know anything about fog, it also distorts sound. So everything you hear, you interpret through the filter of grief. So when somebody says something and they think it's really encouraging, your mind is parsing out the statement and you find the part that, well, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
And and really, that's kind of offensive sometimes, and it's like, what?
Absolutely.
Yes. So it's like, what do you do with that? And I really struggled with that after Cole died. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily handled it really well, but after the girls died, one, I knew to expect these comments. And because I'd worked through them, for the most part, I mean, there were one or two that came up that I hadn't encountered before that I kind of had to process and
Yeah.
work through. But for the most part, those just like rolled off. And expectations are always hard to deal with. I felt like we were in a different age. It's like I say, 20 years had passed. The expectations for the public for people in grief, like I said, we're in a really positive oriented society, especially 12 years ago. I think we're moving like I think people realize there's a point where positivity can become toxic. And I
Yeah.
think we are in that phase now, but we were not 12 years ago. And so, gosh, where was I going with this? Oh, what I was going to say is people generally gave you about a year. They expected you to process everything within about a year.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. And so after that year was over, then there was a frustration if you're not done with it. Right.
Right.
And so I experienced some of that. I, right off, some of my expectations were more realistic. One, I know that there's healing from grief. And, if someone would say, Well, for example, to say you were still grieving your son when your daughters died, I would say that's not quite accurate. And the reason I would say that is because I see grief, and you've kind of referred to this as two processes. There's the active grieving phase, and that's when you're processing all the emotions, the thoughts, your beliefs, the expectations. You're working through all of those things, and it's overwhelming and tumultuous, and it's a really challenging time. And you don't always see the Lord working in the midst of it because everything feels bad for a very long time.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, but I knew that at some point you process through those things and your days are. I wasn't actively grieving my son when my daughters died. Now, when they died, it brought up some things from the past. But, you know, at that point, to me, like the second phase of grief is the living with it. And it's like, oh, here's a trigger. Now I need to deal with the trigger for something in the past. But it was not an everyday, this is very sorrowful. There are moments when, you hit a reminder and you're sad. And sometimes it's just like, oh, somebody stuck a knife through my chest and that really hurt. And then they pulled it out. And it's like, I don't know, some like sci-fi movie where it just automatically heals right away. It's like, oh, I received the blow and now it's gone and you release it. And so
Yeah.
I would say I was kind of in that place. So one, I knew that healing was possible to and and it's important to me to say that because I think sometimes you often hear in the lost community that, you grieve forever. And for somebody who's new to that, that's really frightening. When you're living in this phase of intense pain, it's like it's never going to get better. They just said it's never going to get better. And
Yeah, I'm glad that you've brought this up.
yeah. And for other people, if you say it's not always going to be like this, it's not going to be as tense, sometimes that's hard for them to hear too, because we often associate feeling better as the fact that we no longer need this person or we don't love them as much as we should. And it's like we are devaluing them ourselves. So that's one of the reasons why grief is really
Yeah.
challenging.
It's almost like it feels like a betrayal of your
Yes.
child in some
Yes.
ways.
Yes. So gosh, I've done all that talking and that was in preface to your question, which I cannot remember. Sorry.
Oh no, 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 no. There was no right or wrong answer to that, Janet. No,
So where
I
was I
um
going with that?
I appreciate what you've shared, and I think it's very helpful for people to hear that. I did want to circle back to something you touched on a few minutes ago, and that's how other people deal with us and how we deal with other people after we lose a child. So, yeah, I'm just going to ask, and you can tell me if you don't want to answer it. That's okay. But did did you have people walk away from you after you lost your children, or did you just have to walk away from some people because maybe they just felt a bit toxic?
Yes,
Yeah,
to both.
I suspected you might say that.
Yeah, I think that, we have a group of friends and they are kind of going through the same stages in life. So when you encounter problems, lots of times there's something relatable. And then when you lose a child, there are people, it's like, I can't go there. And it's because it's terrifying to them.
Yeah.
They cannot imagine surviving it themselves. They don't know what to say to you. And so, like, avoidance would probably be the way they respond.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've experienced that as well.
Yes. And then there's other people. There are some people in your life that there are people around you. They might not be in your immediate circle, but maybe they're in your church group, something like that.
Right. Yep.
They're the person that knows everything that's going on everywhere, right?
Don't we all know somebody like that?
Yes. And so sometimes they care about you, and sometimes they're really good at eliciting information from you. But sometimes it's less about caring about you than it is about wanting to be able to be the person in the know.
Yeah.
How is she doing? Well, I can tell you how she's doing. And,
Right.
that kind of thing. And it's not necessarily that they want to gossip about you, it's that they like to be the person in the know, you know?
Yeah.
And there are people that, I think sometimes we, as believers, we fall into gossip kind of innocently and we don't realize how painful it was. One of the difficulties of grieving after the girls died was because I felt like gossip was an issue when Cole died. And so one of the things I really tell people, newly bereaved people, is to look for safe friends. And, safe friends are people, one, that can talk about hard things, and two are people that, don't share information with others. They're
Right.
protective of your emotions, your heart, and that kind of thing. And they're people that validate feelings. So sometimes there are some wonderful people who are real encouragers. At the same time, their direction is always in the future and not helpful for today.
Right.
Um,
I understand that.
yeah, and so I think one of the things I've really discovered was what I was looking for from people was someone to say, "I think I'd feel the same way." And
Mm.
that doesn't necessarily mean that my feeling is a positive feeling. So, like the person who caused the accident that killed my daughters, you know, I was not I really examined my heart, am I looking for revenge or accountability,
Mm.
or what am I looking for? But, there's the part of you, it's like, I really like to picture just grabbing him around the neck and smashing his head against the wall. And if, that doesn't mean I really want to do it. It means
It's the grief
that,
speaking. Yeah.
yes, it's that, this was not right. And this person, maybe they haven't expressed any accountability. Maybe they're rejecting it.
Sure.
And so it's like, if they won't be accountable, I want to be able to be accountable. Now, when you encounter somebody like that in your grief, it's, I think I'd feel the same way. You're not really thinking about like doing anything like that, right? So
Right.
here
Right.
you've got you're finding out one because there are people that will behave in vengeful ways, and you never want to encourage that. you
Right.
know,
And you don't
it's
want to get on the same level.
yes, and it's like we do things according to the law. That's how we respond. But I absolutely understand your emotions, and I'm confident I'd feel the same way, and that
Yeah. Yeah.
makes you feel like, oh, it's okay to feel this way, it,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
think the thought,
Right.
not
Yeah.
expecting to. And I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of grief. I think our society is not well educated about grief. We don't know what's normal. And so lots of times the bereaved themselves are wondering if they're normal. And
I completely agree.
yeah, that was a big part of my journey, in part because I was like, so I had this idea of how a believer is supposed to respond to grief. Some of this I know is realistic, some of it I know is not. And I'm countering that from other people and I'm encountering it within myself, right? But when you have multiple losses, and so technically, psychologists would say that the loss of a child is a traumatic loss. Um, they
Indeed.
just they just define it that way. So multiple traumas, let's say multiple traumas. How how do people that are healthy, and how do believers in particular that have encountered this, how do they respond? Because I wanted to know if what I was doing was normal. And it was really hard to even like get online and find research that would tell you that. Um,
Sure.
and, sometimes you have these feelings and you don't think these are the feelings I should be feeling. So, the event at the side of the road, that I think I don't often talk about PTSD because I think that people think, oh, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, car accidents are common and, that kind of thing. They don't understand what trauma looks like. And you, as an individual, you don't either. You don't know what it looks like. So you have these things going on and you don't know why you're acting this way or thinking this way or feeling this way.
Yeah.
And so, it's challenging. So, like initially, well, I finally I had a grief counselor and I finally asked her, how do people like that have multiple things going on? I know I'm not that unique in the world at large. There are lots of people who have suffered, you know, what I have or more. There are people out there. And how do they respond? And particularly, how do Christians respond? And she was asking me, well, she handed me a notebook and said, how would you describe your feelings? Just write them down. And, I ended up with 2 words on my list, and it was detached and numb. And basically, I felt detached. It's like, I see myself, I know this is horrible. I feel horrible, and yet I don't feel like I think I should feel. It's like I'm watching myself move through
Hmm.
this. And I have people that are crying in front of me and I'm not. And then you have people looking at you like, what's wrong with you? And you, of course, are saying, what's wrong with you? And I had no idea that this was a normal part of trauma, that this is, you've disassociated. And that disassociation can take a very long time. And when it resolves, it goes away, but it can take a long time. And some of that depends on what the actual circumstances are. People think that, at least I think this is what people think, that once you do the funeral, once you accept that this is the circumstances, you've buried this child, the funeral is kind of like, in people's mind, the starting point of recovery.
Hmm.
And that is just wrong. It's really the part where you start assessing and recognizing the totality of the loss.
Yeah. It really is the starting point of the grief journey.
Yes.
And I think so many people who are looking in from the outside, after the funeral, like you were just talking about, they go back to their normal everyday lives. They go back to work, they go back to school, whatever their life was before. And for someone who's lost a child, it feels like their world has stopped.
Yeah.
It feels like it's standing still and nobody understands that I'm here in this place that I could never have imagined. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to do it. I didn't come with an instruction book on how to grieve or how to grieve well. I just suddenly found myself there and I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And it's hard, it hurts, and I don't even want to be here having to deal with this.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately sometimes in the Christian community, you kept using the word a few minutes ago. This is not, I wonder if this is how I'm supposed to grieve. And I think we put too many expectations on ourselves as followers of Jesus sometimes because I'm a Christian, so I should be able to, or I should feel this way. I shouldn't feel that way. And the truth of the matter is, the difference for us is that we have the gift of God's Spirit living in us to help us. He doesn't take it away, but He enables us to walk through it if we'll partner with Him in doing that. But we make it sometimes harder on ourselves because we put these expectations on ourselves that God doesn't put on us. We do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the church will do that as well,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we just have to remember it's okay not to be okay. Now, it's not okay to stay not okay. We do need to be able to, at some point, to do some things, to engage in some things that lead us back to life and that enable us to heal and become whole again. But as you've said many times, it's a long process. If we expect, we live in a microwave culture. We expect everything to happen instantly. Healing should be instant. But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a process.
Yeah. And I help facilitate group share at our church. And a couple of sessions ago, someone asked me, like, at the very end, it's like, why did it take you so long? And I think that the question was really because, there is a place when you're grieving, everything is hurt for so long, and you're just kind of desperate to not hurt anymore. And so if it took me so long, it's fearful that for that person that it might take them that long. And,
Yeah, good point.
they kind of recognize, well, she's not in that same place now, but, you know, it's almost like, what did you do wrong? And I know that wasn't the intent of the question, but I think it was the underlying issue. And, I said, it was really pretty layered in the fact that, well, one, when the collision happened, David was unemployed. We were burying 2 kids. We had one who had health issues, and we were working on recovery, and we knew, we understood, but I don't think the people around us, for the majority, understood her disease. So when I say that I understood this, what I was saying is she was gonna heal to a certain level, which may or may not be where she was before. It was not. And then once she gets to that place, that's the best it's ever gonna be. From there, it's all downhill in increments. And so while other people were looking for progressive healing and at least getting to a place where everything's stable, I knew it was not stable. And, it so this expectation that I should be able to get to a place where I'm living with this stable place, it's like, if this is not going to be the way it is and somebody else does, at least they understand and they're not pushing something upon you. It's like, but if they don't understand that, then you're halfway fighting to say, I'm doing this right and this is taking my time. I know this is right because I'm having to learn to adjust to the fact that it's never going to be stable and it's never going to be what I want it to be. And that takes a lot of time. And then you're also having to come to terms with it's a really uncertain future. I mean, people think, well, it's stabilized. They don't realize that you're still living in massive uncertainty because that health is continuing to change. What's it going to look like? How bad's it going to get? When after the collision, I read the notes from the doctors, and one of them had written about Grayson's recovery that they expected she might end up in long-term care, just like right then, from then on,
Yeah, wow.
most people didn't even recognize that might be a possibility, and they just so it's like she she recovered enough that she was able to independently get in and out of her wheelchair, navigate the world to a degree. So she went to college, she lived in a dorm. This is something we really wanted for her and we were also extremely terrified about. You know, when you've lost repeatedly, you're just kind of living on waiting for the next shoe to drop, you
Oh,
know?
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear that quite often.
Yes. So, that was really stressful time, and people's expectations for you are just completely unrealistic, and yet they don't realize it. So,
Yeah,
it's
that's true.
it's like, how do you make somebody understand that what you're requesting of me is not realistic? And
Yeah.
and what you find is that when you try to say, you know, this is not realistic because of blah, 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 what you get is that devil's advocate who tells you why your thinking is wrong, as opposed to going, oh, thank you for clarifying what's going on because I didn't understand that's how
Yeah.
this works.
Yeah. Or simply just listening to us without having to add something to it. Because if you haven't lived it, then how can you what authority do you have to speak into that person's life about how they should be, and you fill in the blank? You can't. You're putting yourself in a position you're not qualified for. And we don't need other people laying their expectations on us about how we should grieve, how long how long it's been. You know, you need to, come on, don't you think that you need to be a little further along by now? So all of those things you're having to contend with as well. So to be clear for our listeners, you and I want them to understand there is no right or wrong way to grieve. What what works for you, what gives you comfort, and what gives you peace, and we can both tell you that real comfort and peace are found in the person of Jesus Christ. We
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
You can try to find that in other ways, but we can both tell you it won't satisfy, it won't answer your questions. And God doesn't promise to answer all of our questions as it
Right.
relates to the death of our child.
Right.
He simply asks us to partner with him, invite him into our grief with us, give it to him, and he promised that he would walk with us through it. I love Psalm 34:18, I believe it is, that says, God is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit, which very accurately describes someone like us who's lost a child. And for others, if you're trying to help somebody else who has lost a child, it's not you. Romans 12:15, I believe it is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Janet, says to celebrate with those who celebrate and to grieve with those who grieve. So offer them your presence. It's okay to offer yourself to come alongside and grieve with them. Sometimes we need to borrow from your faith. Sometimes we need to borrow from your strength. But please don't feel like you have to come and offer these magic words that are going to fix us. We're not projects that need to be fixed to begin
Yeah.
with. We're hurting people who need other people. We need the fellowship, and we just need to know that they remember. We need to know that they remember our child, that our child mattered. And please use our child's name. Please ask about our child. Believe me, it doesn't scare us. It doesn't put us off. It doesn't upset us. We love to hear other people use our child's name
Yes.
and talk about our child.
Yeah.
I
Share a
know you would
memory.
agree with that.
Yeah. Share a memory is
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
really, and sometimes that's the Lord's mercies are new every day. And sometimes it's you get an email from someone who says, hey, I went by the cemetery. Or someone says, I don't know, I was thinking about Bethany or I was thinking about Katie today and just
Oh, those are
share a
treasures,
memory.
aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And every once in a while, someone will share a picture and it's like, I don't have that. Will you give me a copy
Yeah.
of that?
Yes.
Because you wanna hold on to everything you possibly can.
Yes. That is so true.
Yeah,
That
I
is
don't
so
care if it's
true.
a bad picture, I'll take any pic
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you can say that 12 years later. We say that 10 years later. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
because we don't have all the photos maybe that you have. We don't
right,
have the emails or the texts or whatever it might be that
yeah,
you have. So, yeah,
yeah,
please share. Yeah,
yeah,
that can brighten up a day like you would not believe.
yeah.
Well, Janet Box, I just so appreciate you coming on our podcast today and sharing your story and just opening up your heart and giving our listeners a glimpse into your grief journey, but also into your healing journey. And for those of you who are listening, I hope that you can hear the joy that I see on Janet's face as we're sitting here talking. I hope that you can hear the hope that she has in her relationship with Jesus, and in the certain hope, I will say, that she is going to see those precious children again one day in heaven. So thank you so very much for being our guest today, Janet.
Thank you for inviting me along. I will say that one of the things that was most helpful to me or has been, and it's been a journey, it's like I'm learning things still today, is
Sure.
really learning about the character of God because, we look at our circumstances and we think they reflect how he feels about us. And one thing I really learned and I am so grateful for is his moral purity. And when I say
Yes.
that, it means to me that everything he allows in my life, every decision he makes for me is filtered through not whether he'll receive glory, but whether it'll be beneficial to me. And how can child loss be beneficial to anyone? And what I have found is that I have learned more about the Lord and his purposes and have found more contentment through suffering, you know, through that awful season than any other area of my life. And a lot of it is because sometimes what he's allowed, those painful things, are because they mature me spiritually. And that's his highest priority. So my daughter's health, her failing health, that's not its highest priority. Her heart is his highest priority. And and it takes a while to really like appreciate that the way he does.
It
But when
does.
yeah, but when you look through the lens of eternity and our hope for eternity, you develop a more eternal perspective. And I think that's where contentment grows from. And I have no, everything is not necessarily the way I'd like it to be, but I have found contentment in the life that I have, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
I love that you shared that because it's important for people to understand that you can have joy and hope coexisting with grief, and you can find contentment and purpose and meaning and in life again. Doesn't seem like it maybe where you are today, but just hang on. It will get better, and it's not a product of time. It's a product of having to of embracing the grief and walking through it. And I would say, and I think Janet would agree, the most important aspect of that is partnering with the Lord in that
Yeah,
and letting him walk you through it so that you don't go through it. He never intended for us to go through it by ourselves.
yeah, and learn to lament because we're really not taught
Yes.
what lament what true biblical lament looks like, but it will make a huge difference in your life if you can, share all those complaints with him. You don't have to be afraid to say how you really feel. He knows it in the first place, so you're not telling him anything he doesn't know. Um,
No, very true.
yeah, but also just expressing trust in who he is so that he can bring you past that level of pain and into a place of peace.
Yes, absolutely. Janet, thank you again. And for our listeners today, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules to come and listen to Janet today. We both pray that the Lord will give you some hope and encouragement through what you've heard today. And if it does, and you would like, we would invite you to click on the link for Apple Podcasts, and you can go and leave a review or comments on today's episode or about the podcast in general. There's also a link where you can just simply share your thoughts about today's episode. So we would invite you to do either or both. We value and love the input of our listeners. Hope you all have a really good week, and we'll look forward to having you all back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Well, thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this episode encouraging and helpful. If you did, would you mind taking just 1 minute to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts by clicking the link provided in each episode description, and then sharing with someone you know? And as always, thank you for listening.